Hey guys, tonight we're stepping through the veil of time itself, leaving behind the hum of modern life to find ourselves on the banks of the ancient Nile, where the morning sun paints the water gold and the air carries whispers of a civilization that built monuments to last forever. You're about to discover what it truly means to be a keeper of sacred words in the heart of ancient Egypt, where every stroke of your reed pen connects you to the gods themselves. Just try not to accidentally invent the printing press. We're not quite ready for that revolution yet. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. So when you out there sharing this journey with me. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first sensation that greets you isn't sight, but sound, the gentle lapping of the Nile against reed-lined banks, a rhythm as old as civilization itself. Your eyes flutter open to a world painted in amber and rose, where the sun hovers just above the eastern horizon like a great eye of Ra himself. The air tastes different here, clean and dry with hints of river mud and blooming lotus flowers. You're lying on soft grass near the water's edge, your modern clothes somehow transformed into a simple linen tunic that feels surprisingly comfortable against your skin. Rising slowly to your feet, you feel the ancient earth solid beneath you. No concrete, no asphalt, just packed dirt worn smooth by countless sandaled feet. The landscape before you takes your breath away. Across the river, limestone cliffs catch the morning light, but it's what rises before you that truly stops your heart. The temple complex of Karnak, its massive columns and towering pylons creating a forest of stone that seems to touch the very heavens. The scale is impossible to comprehend from your modern perspective. These aren't the weathered ruins you might have seen in photographs. This is Karnak in its full glory. Every surface carved with intricate hieroglyphs that seem to dance in the shifting light. Obelisks pierce the sky like needles, their gold-capped peaks already glowing with the sun's first rays. The morning air carries the distant sound of chanting, the deep voices of priests beginning their daily communion with the gods. A group of men walks past you on the pathway that leads toward the temple entrance, their heads freshly shaved, wearing crisp white linen kilts. They carry red baskets filled with scrolls and writing implements, talking quietly among themselves in voices that sound almost musical. One of them notices you standing there, somewhat bewildered, and approaches with a kind smile. "New scribe?" he asks in accented but clear speech, and somehow you understand perfectly. First day always overwhelms. The gods built big here. His gentle humor puts you at ease, and you find yourself nodding. He gestures toward the temple. "Come. Elder scribes expect you in the house of life before Ra climbs higher." You fall into step beside him, your bare feet finding the rhythm of walking on ancient stone. The pathway is lined with sphinx statues, their enigmatic faces watching your procession with eternal patience. As you draw closer to the temple entrance, the true magnitude of human achievement here becomes clear. These aren't just buildings, they're prayers made manifest in stone, each carved symbol a conversation with eternity. Your guide points to various structures as you walk. That pylon, they're built by Ramesses the Great's grandfather. Those columns support weight of Pharaoh's ambitions. He chuckles softly. "We scribes, we record it all. Pharaohs come and go, but words remain forever." The scent of incense begins to reach you now. Frankincense and myrrh mixing with the morning air to create something that feels sacred, transformative. You realize that you're not just walking toward a job or a role, reapproaching a calling that connects you to the divine through the simple act of forming symbols with a reed pen. As you pass through the massive entrance pylon, dwarfed by walls that tower 40 feet above you, carved with scenes of gods and pharaohs in eternal dialogue. You feel the weight of history settling around your shoulders like a comfortable cloak. This isn't just time travel, this is coming home to a life you were always meant to live. The first step into the temple proper sends a shiver through your entire being, not from cold, but from the overwhelming sense of entering a space where the divine and mortal worlds intersect. The hypostyle hall stretches before you like a forest of stone columns, each one thick enough that 4 people holding hands couldn't encircle it. Your neck cranes back involuntarily as you try to take in their impossible height, disappearing into shadows above where small windows filter dusty beams of golden light. Your guide, who introduces himself as Kamwaset, notices your awe and grins. First time seeing the forest of stone, yes? We scribes. We joke that the columns grow taller each year. Pharaohs keep adding to them like eager gardeners. His laughter echoes softly in the vast space, a sound that feels both tiny and perfectly at home here. The floor beneath your feet is worn smooth by generations of priests, scribes, and worshippers, and you can feel the slight depressions where countless others have walked this exact path. Every surface around you tells a story. Hieroglyphs climb the columns like ivy, depicting scenes of pharaohs making offerings to gods blessing the land with flood and harvest, and the eternal cycle of death and rebirth that governs all Egyptian thought. As you walk deeper into the complex, you pass alcoves where priests tend small altars, the smoke from their incense burners creating lazy spirals that dance in the morning light. The sound of chanting grows stronger, a deep harmonic rhythm that seems to make the very stones vibrate with sacred energy. You wonder what your old world would make of this daily communion with the divine, where gods aren't distant concepts but living presences, requiring daily care and attention. Kamwaset leads you through a series of courtyards, each one progressively more intimate and sacred than the last. Here, the tourist crowds of your time would never be allowed. This is the working heart of the temple, where the real business of maintaining cosmic order takes place. Priests hurry past, carrying ritual implements, their movements purposeful and practiced. Some nod to Kamwaset in recognition, their eyes curious but welcoming as they take note of the new scribe in their midst. The House of Life lies just ahead, Kamwaset explains, gesturing toward a building that seems modest compared to the towering grandeur around it. We scribes, we prefer practical spaces. Less impressive than Pharaoh's monuments, but more comfortable for long days of writing. The building is constructed of mud brick rather than limestone, its walls thick enough to keep the interior cool, even in the blazing heat of midday. You pass through a doorway carved with protective symbols, the Ankh for life, the jet pillar for stability, the Wa scepter for power. These aren't mere decorations, but active prayers, each one carefully placed to ensure that the knowledge preserved within these walls remains safe and potent. The morning breeze follows you inside, carrying with it the distant sounds of the Nile and the city of Thebes, awakening to another day. The scriptorium opens before you like a scholar's dream made manifest. Low tables line the room, each one equipped with palettes for mixing ink, water jars for cleaning brushes, and wooden boxers containing scrolls and writing implements. Scribes are already at work, some copying texts with intense concentration, others preparing fresh papyrus or mixing new batches of black and red ink. The soft scratching of reed pens against papyrus creates a gentle rhythm, like rain on leaves. Natural light floods the space through high windows designed to provide perfect illumination without the harsh glare that might strain tired eyes. During long copying sessions, the walls are lined with niches containing hundreds of scrolls, their leather ties and wooden tags, creating a library that represents thousands of years of accumulated wisdom. Medical texts sit beside religious poetry. Astronomical calculations rest next to royal correspondence, and temple records share space with love songs that would make your modern world blush. An elderly scribe at the far end of the room looks up from his work, and beckons you over. His movements are deliberate and graceful, speaking of decades spent in perfect control of reed pen and papyrus. Kim Waset whispers that this is Amenhotep, one of the most respected scribes in all of Karnak, a man whose beautiful hieroglyphs have adorned royal tombs and temple walls throughout the kingdom. So Amenhotep says, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone accustomed to being listened to, "You are the new keeper of words that the gods have sent us." His eyes, bright with intelligence, despite his advanced years, study you with gentle curiosity. Have you ever held the gift of Thoth in your hands before? You realize he's referring to the art of writing itself, named for the ibis-headed god of wisdom and scribes. The morning light shifts slightly, casting new patterns across the room as the sun climbs higher, and you sense that your real education is about to begin. Amenhotep's weathered hands move with the precision of a master craftsman as he guides you to an empty table positioned to catch the perfect angle of morning light. The wooden surface is worn smooth by countless hours of use, polished to a warm honey color that seems to glow in the filtered sunlight. You can see faint impressions in the wood where previous scribes have pressed their reed pens, perhaps a little too enthusiastically. Battle scars of the scholarly life that make you smile. First lesson, Amenhotep says, settling onto a low stool beside you. Papyrus does not forgive impatience. Like Pharaoh's temper and crocodiles, hunger best approached with proper respect. His eyes twinkle with humor as he produces several strips of papyrus from a nearby basket, each one golden brown and slightly translucent, like autumn leaves preserved in honey. He demonstrates the morning ritual of preparation with movements so practiced they've become a form of meditation. First comes the papyrus inspection, holding each strip to the light to check for tears or weak spots that might cause problems later. The material feels different under your fingers than you expected. Neither quite like paper nor fabric, but something uniquely its own. It has a subtle texture, slightly rough in one direction and smooth in the other, depending on how the reeds were laid when it was made. This particular batch comes from marshes near Memphis, Amenhotep explains, smoothing a sheet with gentle strokes. The scribes there claim their reeds produce the finest writing surface in all Egypt. We Theban scribes, naturally, we disagree. He chuckles softly. Rivalry between scriptoriums runs deeper than the Nile during flood season. Next comes the preparation of ink, a process that transforms simple materials into the medium through which thoughts become immortal. Amenhotep shows you how to mix powdered charcoal with gum, Arabic, and water, creating a black ink so deep it seems to absorb light. The consistency must be perfect, too thick, and it clogs the pen, too thin, and the symbols blur into illegible smudges. You watch him test the mixture on a practice sheet, adjusting the proportions with the expertise of someone who's done this thousands of times. The red ink requires different materials entirely ochre ground to the finest powder, mixed with the same gum Arabic, but requiring different proportions to achieve the proper flow. Red ink is reserved for titles, section headings, and corrections, making it precious in its own right. Red ink speaks with authority, Amenhotep notes, as he prepares a small batch. Use it wisely, or other scribes will think you. Consider every word you write worthy of Pharaoh's attention. The reed pens themselves are works of art, each one carefully selected from specific marsh plants and shaped with delicate knife work. Amenhotep produces several from his personal collection, explaining how different cuts create different line weights and textures. Some are perfect for formal hieroglyphs, others better suited to the flowing cursive hieratic script used for everyday documents. The tips have been chewed to create fine brushes, a technique that takes considerable practice to master without destroying the pen entirely. Your teeth become as important as your eyes in this profession, he observes, demonstrating the proper chewing technique. Many new scribes spend their first months growing frustrated with pens that won't cooperate, not realizing the problem lies in their preparation, not their skill. Around you, the scriptorium continues its gentle morning rhythm. Other scribes work in comfortable concentration, the soft scratching of their pens creating a sound that has become as natural as breathing in this sacred space. Occasionally, someone rises to consult a reference scroll or mix fresh ink. Their movements quiet and economical, respecting the concentration of their colleagues. You notice how the light changes subtly as the sun climbs higher, and realize that the scribes unconsciously adjust their positions to maintain optimal illumination without even thinking about it. This is knowledge accumulated through years of practice, the kind of wisdom that can only be gained through daily repetition and careful attention to craft. Amenhotep places a practice sheet before you and selects a well-prepared pen from his collection. Now we begin with the most important symbol of all, he says, dipping the reed into the black ink with a practiced motion. The symbol for scribe itself, see how it combines the palette, the water jar, and the reed pen. Even our name reminds us that we are nothing without our tools. The morning air carries the sound of temple activities beginning in earnest priests calling to each other across courtyards, the distant splash of ritual ablutions, and the soft percussion of sandaled feet on stone path. You realize that this daily preparation ritual is just about readying materials for work. It is about preparing yourself to serve as a bridge between the mortal world and the realm of eternal knowledge that the gods have entrusted to human hands. Your first attempt at holding the reed pen feels remarkably like trying to write with a you realize with amusement is essentially what you're doing. Amenhotep watches patiently as you fumble with the grip, your modern hands accustomed to ballpoint pens and keyboards struggling to find the proper angle and pressure. The reed wants to skip across the papyrus surface, leaving scratchy marks that bear no resemblance to the elegant hieroglyphs surrounding you. Patience with yourself, Amenhotep counsels, his voice carrying the wisdom of someone who's guided countless students through this same frustration. The pen must become extension of your soul, not enemy of your fingers. Watch the reed teaches you its nature if you listen properly. He demonstrates the proper grip, showing how the pen should rest naturally in the web between thumb and forefinger, supported but not The first symbol he teaches you is surprisingly practical rather than sacred, the simple stroke that represents a loaf of bread, shaped like a half circle with a small line at the base. Every scribe must eat, he explains with a gentle smile, and temple records require more bread tallies than prayers to Ra. Master the bread before attempting the god's name. You practice the stroke repeatedly, feeling the resistance of the papyrus against the reed tip, learning to control the flow of ink that wants to pool in imperfections or race ahead of your intention. Gradually, your marks begin to resemble something that might generously be called hieroglyphic, though they still lack the confident fluidity of proper temple script. Other scribes occasionally glance over with encouraging nods, remembering their own clumsy first attempts. In the Old Kingdom, Amenhotep shares as you work. Scribes learn by copying the same text 50 times before moving to new material. Repetition carved the symbols into memory deeper than any chisel-carved stone. He points to a shelf lined with practice scrolls, their surfaces covered with endless repetitions of basic symbols. We still keep tradition. Muscle memory serves scribes better than cleverness. The next symbol proves more challenging, the seated man hieroglyph that represents the concept of a person or official. The proportions must be precise, with the head exactly 1/8, the height of the entire figure, the torso properly balanced, and the seated posture conveying dignity without stiffness. Your first attempts produce figures that look more like they were suffering from ancient Egyptian food poisoning than serving in Pharaoh's administration. Kamwasat, working at a nearby table, glances over and stifles a laugh. My early scribes looked like they were fleeing from hippos, he whispers conspiratorially. Amenhotep's patience preserved many future careers that might otherwise have ended in the military. The morning progresses with steady practice, your hand slowly adapting to the alien feel of reed against papyrus. Amenhotep introduces new symbols, gradually the water jar, the bird representing different sounds and concepts, the eye that can mean either the organ of sight or the act of seeing. Each one requires not just memorization but understanding of the underlying logic that governs Egyptian writing, where pictures can represent sounds, concepts, or both. Simultaneously, hieroglyphs think differently than your ... Amenhotep pauses, searching for words to describe whatever writing system he assumes you used before arriving here. Previous experience. Each symbol lives, breathes, connects to divine order. Not mere marks on papyrus, but living prayers that speak to gods and men across centuries. Around you, the established scribes work on more advanced projects. One copies a medical text, his pen moving with practiced confidence as he reproduces complex anatomical drawings alongside treatment prescriptions. Another works on temple accounts, his hieratic script flowing in neat columns as he records offerings brought by visiting dignitaries. A third carefully copies religious poetry onto papyrus destined for a noble's tomb, each symbol perfect enough to serve the deceased in the afterlife. The scent of fresh ink mingles with incense, drifting from the temple proper, creating an atmosphere that feels both scholarly and sacred. You begin to understand why scribes are held in such high regard in Egyptian society. They read not mere clerks but guardians of the knowledge that keeps civilization functioning. Every symbol you're struggling to master represents a link in the chain that connects pharaoh to farmer, priest to peasant, this world to the next. Your hand grows steadier, Amenhotep observes, examining your latest attempts. Soon you'll be ready for actual temple work inventory scrolls that must be accurate, or priests become very unhappy about missing sacred bread. His dry humor makes you realize that even in this most reverent of settings, scribes maintain the practical attitude of professionals who know their work matters. But do you want to take themselves too seriously? The morning light shifts again, and you notice other scribes adjusting their positions to maintain optimal working conditions. This dance with the sun happens so naturally you wonder if it is conscious or instinctive after years of practice. The sound reaches you first a deep, rhythmic chanting that seems to emerge from the very stones of the temple itself. The morning rituals are beginning in earnest, and even within the scholarly quiet of the House of Life, you can feel the sacred energy building like a distant storm approaching across the desert. Amenhotep sets down his pen and gestures toward the doorway, where other scribes are already gathering their materials for the day's first official duty. "Come," he says, rising with the fluid grace of someone whose joints have learned to cooperate with decades of sitting at writing tables. "Before we continue your education, you must witness what gives our work meaning. The priests perform the daily awakening of the god, and we scribes, we record their every word, their every gesture, for eternity." You follow him through corridors that grow progressively more sacred, the walls decorated with increasingly complex and beautiful hieroglyphs that seem to glow in the lamplight. The air grows thick with frankincense and myrrh, so heavy you can almost taste the sacred smoke. Other scribes join your procession, each carrying their writing kit in leather satchels that have been worn smooth by years of daily use. The inner courtyard opens before you like a stage set for divine drama. Massive columns frame the space, their capitals carved to represent lotus blossoms and papyrus plants, the symbols of Upper and Lower Egypt united under Pharaoh's rule. But it's the Nyas, the sacred shrine at the far end, that draws your attention. Even from this distance, you can see the golden doors that protect the god's statue, reflecting the morning light like captured sunfire. "Position ourselves here," Amenhotep whispers, indicating a spot along the wall where several other scribes have already arranged their materials. Close enough to observe, far enough to avoid disturbing sacred proceedings. Priests appreciate accurate records, but they appreciate respectful scribes even more. The ceremony begins with the arrival of the high priest, his white linen garments so pristine they seem to radiate purity. His head is freshly shaved, as is traditional for all priests, and his movements carry the weight of someone who speaks directly with the gods on behalf of all Egypt. Behind him come the lesser priests, each one bearing specific ritual implements, golden vessels for light, incense burners that send aromatic smoke spiraling toward the painted ceiling, and offerings of bread, beer, and meat, fresh from the temple's own production facilities. You position your papyrus and ready your pen, suddenly nervous about the responsibility of recording sacred events. What if you miss something crucial? What if your still clumsy hieroglyphs fail to capture the divine significance of what you're witnessing? Amenhotep seems to sense your anxiety and places a steadying hand on your shoulder. The gods judge intent more harshly than penmanship. He whispers with gentle humor. Record what you observe honestly, and Thoth will guide your hand toward accuracy. The high priest approaches the naos and begins the ritual unsealing, speaking words in the most ancient form of Egyptian language, so archaic that even some of the younger priests follow along with written texts. His voice carries clearly across the courtyard, each syllable pronounced with the precision of someone who knows that mispronunciation could disrupt the cosmic order itself. You attempt to transcribe his words, your pen racing to keep pace with the formal cadences of temple speech. The golden doors swing open to reveal the god's statue, magnificent beyond description, carved from the finest black granite and adorned with gold, jewelry that catches the morning light and throws it back in brilliant sparkles. The god's eyes, inlaid with precious stones, seem to look directly at you across the centuries, and for a moment you feel the weight of genuine divine presence in this place. The priests begin their morning offerings, presenting fresh bread still warm from the temple bakeries, jars of beer brewed according to recipes handed down since the pyramids were young, and cuts of meat from animals specially raised for sacred purposes. Each offering is presented with specific prayers, and the high priest carefully anoints the statue with precious oils that fill the air with fragrances of cedar and cinnamon. Notice how they handle each object, Amenhotep murmurs as you write. Every gesture has been perfected over centuries. Priests train for decades to achieve such precision. We scribes, we preserve their knowledge, so future priests need not rediscover what their ancestors already learned. The ritual continues with readings from sacred texts, the priest's voices blending in harmonious recitation of hymns that praise the goddess power and ask for continued protection over Egypt. Your pen scratches steadily across the papyrus, recording not just words but noting the emotional weight behind them, the way voices rise and fall with the rhythm of ancient poetry. Around you, the other scribes work with quiet concentration, their pens moving in practiced rhythms as they fulfill their role as guardians of religious accuracy. You begin to understand that this is beyond mere secretarial work, you participating in the preservation of cosmic order itself, ensuring that the relationship between gods and mortals continues unbroken across generations. The morning's sacred duties leave you feeling both exhilarated and mentally exhausted, your hand cramped from rapid transcription and your mind buzzing with the intensity of witnessing divine communion up close. As the priests conclude their rituals and begin dispersing to their various daily responsibilities, Amenhotep signals that it is time to return to the House of Life for the midday meal, a prospect that makes your stomach rumble with surprising enthusiasm. The scriptorium has been temporarily abandoned for the dining area, a pleasant courtyard shaded by date palms, where long wooden tables accommodate the temple's scholarly community. The space feels refreshingly informal after the morning's ceremonial intensity, filled with the comfortable chatter of colleagues sharing both food and gossip. You settle onto a woven mat beside who has already torn into a loaf of bread with the enthusiasm of someone who has worked up a serious appetite. First morning surviving the sacred transcription, he grins, offering you a piece of bread that's still warm from the temple bakeries. Most new scribes spend their first ceremony so nervous about recording every word correctly that they forget to actually observe what is happening. You looked reasonably alert, which suggests either natural talent or exceptional foolishness. The bread is unlike anything from your previous life, dense and nutty. Made from emmer wheat and flavored with coriander seeds that pop between your teeth with bursts of citrusy spice. It's accompanied by a thick beer that's more like liquid bread than the beverages you remember, sweet and nourishing with just enough fermentation to make it safe to drink. The combination fills your stomach with warmth and provides exactly the kind of sustenance your body craves after hours of intense concentration. This beer recipe comes from Pharaoh's own brewers, explains an older scribe whose weathered hands speak of decades spent copying royal correspondence. Temple gets the same quality as Palace One of the benefits of serving the gods, instead of provincial governors who think scribes should be satisfied with barley water and gratitude. The meal continues with dishes that reveal the sophistication of temple cuisine. Fresh fish from the Nile, grilled with herbs that make your mouth water, accompanied by vegetables you don't recognize but find surprisingly delicious. Onions and garlic feature prominently, along with leafy greens that have been dressed with oil and vinegar. The flavors are clean and bright, seasoned with cumin and coriander that make everything taste more vivid than you expected ancient food could be. Conversation flows as freely as the buyer, touching on topics that reveal the scribe's wide-ranging interests and responsibilities. Amenhotep discusses the challenges of copying medical texts when the original papyrus is partially damaged by age and handling. Another scribe complains good-naturedly about a priest who keeps requesting modifications to his personal prayer scrolls, apparently convinced that adjusting the wording will increase their effectiveness. Last week he wanted me to make the hieroglyph for prosperity larger, the scribe laughs, as if Thoth judges prayers by font size rather than sincerity. I suggested he try praying louder, first less work for everyone involved. You find yourself relaxing into the easy camaraderie of the group, their humor both professional and affectionate. These men take their sacred duties seriously while maintaining the practical perspective of craftsmen. Understand that even divine work requires human hands and human judgment. They've seen enough of temple politics and priestly personalities to maintain healthy skepticism alongside genuine reverence. The new scribe needs to learn about afternoon duties. Kimwaset reminds the group between bites of fish. Someone should explain the filing system before he accidentally stores royal correspondence with laundry lists. This generates a round of knowing chuckles. Apparently, every scriptorium has its organizational challenges. Sinope launches into a description of the temple's record-keeping system, which proves to be remarkably sophisticated. Different types of documents require different storage methods and access protocols. Religious texts occupy the most secure areas, protected by both physical barriers and religious taboo. Administrative records are organized by date and subject, cross-referenced in ways that would impress modern librarians. Personal correspondence and literary works have their own sections, carefully maintained but more accessible to scribes seeking reference materials. The system works well until someone decides to reorganize everything according to their own logic, Sanob notes wryly. We had a new chief scribe a few years ago, who thought chronological arrangement was inefficient. Took us months to find anything, and we're still discovering scrolls that got misfiled during his enthusiastic improvements. As the meal draws to a close, you notice how the light has shifted, indicating that the afternoon's work period approaches. The scribes begin gathering their materials with the unhurried efficiency of professionals, who know exactly how long each task requires. The temporary relaxation of mealtime gives way to focused preparation for the day's remaining responsibilities. The afternoon brings your first real taste of administrative responsibility. As Amenhotep leads you to a section of the scriptorium dedicated to what he diplomatically calls diplomatic correspondence. Though the knowing looks exchanged between the other scribes suggest there is more entertainment value in these documents than their formal title implies. The afternoon light streams through the high windows at a perfect angle, illuminating your workspace with golden warmth that makes the papyrus seem to glow. Today we record tribute from visiting dignitaries, Amenhotep explains, settling beside you with a fresh sheet of papyrus and his best ceremonial red pen. Nubian princes, Mesopotamian merchants, Levantan craftsmen come bearing gifts to demonstrate their respect for Pharaoh's divine authority. Our job is to document everything accurately, because Pharaoh's memory for gifts received is remarkably precise. The first delegation arrives with considerable fanfare, their exotic appearance immediately capturing your attention. The Nubian ambassador is a tall, dignified man whose dark skin gleams with oils scented with frankincense. His clothing woven from cotton so fine it seems to float around his body. Behind him come servants carrying tribute that makes your eyes widen with wonder-carved ivory tusks, longer than your arm. Leopard skins with spots so perfect they might have been painted, and leather bags that clink with the unmistakable sound of gold. The ivory must be described precisely number of tusks, approximate length, quality of carving. The gold gets weighed, but we estimate quantities for preliminary records. And try not to let your amazement show, too. Obviously these diplomats are skilled at reading faces, and they'll adjust their future offerings based on how impressed the scribes appear. Your pen scratches across the papyrus as you attempt to capture not just the physical details of each tribute item, but the subtle diplomatic dance playing out before you. The Nubian ambassador speaks with practiced eloquence about his ruler's eternal friendship with Egypt, while carefully positioning each gift to catch the light most favorably. His words are formal and flowery, but his eyes constantly gauge the reaction of the receiving priests, adjusting his presentation based on their responses. 3 elephant tusks, carved with scenes of lions hunting. You write, then add a note about the exceptional artistry of the work. The ivory carving is so detailed you can see individual whiskers on the lions' faces, each figure seeming to move with lifelike energy. You wonder what tools could achieve such precision, and make a mental note to ask about Nubian crafting techniques later. The next delegation proves even more exotic merchants from distant Mesopotamia, their beards elaborately braided and their robes decorated with patterns you've never seen before. They present cylinder seals carved from precious stones, each one a miniature masterpiece that could roll entire stories across wet clay. Their tribute includes silver vessels so finely worked they seem to have been shaped by divine hands, and spices that fill the entire room with fragrances of distant markets. Mesopotamians always bring the most interesting gifts, Kamwaset whispers from his nearby table, where he's recording similar proceedings with a different delegation. Last year they presented a mechanical device that tracked star movements. Took 3 scribes working together to describe it properly, and we're still not entirely sure how it functions. Your afternoon fills with a parade of exotic visitors, each group offering tribute that reflects the wealth and craftsmanship of their homeland. Levantan merchants present amphorae of wine aged in cedar casks, the vessels themselves works of art decorated with scenes of grape harvests and dancing figures. Syrian craftsmen offer textiles dyed in colors so vivid they seem to pulse with inner light purples that put royal Egyptian cloth to shame, and blues deeper than the Nile at flood stage. Between delegations, Amenhotep provides commentary that reveals the political subtleties behind each offering. The Nubians bring less gold this year, he observes quietly. Either their minds are less productive, or they're testing how much they can reduce tribute without causing diplomatic problems. The Mesopotamians, on the other hand, bring more valuable items than usual suggests. They need Egypt's military support for something. The most amusing moment comes when a delegation of Libyan chieftains presents what they proudly describe as the finest ostriches in the known world. The magnificent birds are indeed impressive, their feathers pristine white, and their bearing almost regal. However, one of the ostriches takes exception to the formal atmosphere and begins aloud. Indignant honking that echoes through the entire temple complex. Note in the record that the ostriches are vocal, Amenhotep suggests with barely contained laughter. Future caretakers will appreciate the warning. As the afternoon progresses, you begin to appreciate the diplomatic skill required for this work. Each gift must be recorded not just for its material value, but for its symbolic significance and political implications. The scribes serve as more than mere accountants, they are cultural interpreters, helping Egyptian administrators understand the intentions and capabilities of distant peoples. The diplomatic pageantry eventually winds down as the sun begins its descent toward the western horizon, and you find yourself grateful for the quieter rhythm that follows. Amenhotep suggests a brief respite in the temple gardens before the evening's work begins, and you eagerly accept the invitation to stretch legs that have grown stiff from hours of careful sitting and transcribing. The sacred gardens prove to be an oasis of tranquility tucked between the temple's massive stone structures, designed as much for contemplation as for practical cultivation. Pathways of crushed limestone wind between carefully tended beds where lotus flowers bloom in stone-lined pools. There are white and blue petals floating on water, so still it perfectly mirrors the sky above. The contrast between the bustling administrative areas and this peaceful sanctuary feels like stepping from one world into another entirely. Every temple needs spaces for quiet thought. Amenhotep explains as you walk along a path bordered by date palms whose fronds rustle gently in the afternoon breeze. Scribes who spend entire days wrestling with difficult texts or temperamental priests require places to restore their spiritual balance. The gardens serve mind and soul as much as they provide vegetables for temple kitchens. You notice how the garden's design incorporates both practical and aesthetic elements with sophisticated planning. Vegetable plots occupy the areas that receive optimal morning sun, growing onions, garlic, lettuce, and other crops that supplement the temple's food supply. Medicinal herbs cluster near a small shrine dedicated to Thoth, their aromatic leaves releasing therapeutic scents when brushed by passing visitors. Fruit trees provide shade for stone benches, positioned to catch afternoon breezes, while offering views of blooming flower beds. The sound of water draws your attention to a series of channels that distribute Nile water throughout the garden with ingenious efficiency. The irrigation system operates through a network of small sluices and gates that can be adjusted to direct water precisely where it's needed, maintaining perfect moisture levels without waste. You marvel at the engineering sophistication required to create such an elegant solution to desert agriculture. Sit here for a moment, Amenhotep suggests, indicating a bench positioned beneath a sycamore fig tree whose broad leaves filter the light into dancing patterns. Watch the ibises, they come here every afternoon, and observing their behavior teaches valuable lessons about patience and persistence. As if summoned by his words, several sacred ibises wade into the shallow pools, where lotus flowers bloom, their long curved beaks probing the water with methodical precision. Their movements are unhurried but purposeful, each step calculated to achieve maximum efficiency with minimum disturbance to their environment. You realize these birds embody the same qualities that make excellent scribes: careful observation, patient attention to detail, and the wisdom to work steadily rather than frantically. The garden's peaceful atmosphere encourages reflection on the morning's experiences, and you find your mind processing the cultural richness you've encountered. The diplomatic ceremonies revealed layers of international relationship and political subtlety that operate far beyond what most people ever witness. The scribe's casual expertise demonstrated knowledge accumulated through decades of careful observation and practice. Even the simple act of preparing papyrus and ink connects to traditions stretching back thousands of years. The first scribes who've worked in this temple have been dead for centuries. Amenhotep muses, as if reading your thoughts, but their influence continues through every technique we practice, every traditional method we preserve. When you hold that reed pen, you're connected to an unbroken chain of knowledge that links you to the very foundations of civilization. A gentle splash draws your attention to the lotus pool, where a small frog has surfaced among the floating petals. Its presence seems perfectly natural here, part of the garden's carefully balanced ecosystem that supports both cultivated plants and wild creatures. The frog's contented croaking adds another layer to the garden's quiet symphony of rustling leaves, flowing water, and distant temple activities. The afternoon light begins to take on the golden quality that signals day's gradual transition toward evening. And you notice other temple workers beginning to appear in the gardens. Priests walk slowly along the pathways, their white linen garments bright against the green foliage as they engage in quiet conversation or solitary contemplation. Servants tend to maintenance tasks with unobtrusive efficiency, ensuring that this sanctuary remains perfect for tomorrow's visitors. Soon we return to evening duties, Amenhotep notes, rising from the bench with the careful movements of someone whose joints have learned to accommodate long days of scholarly work. But first, you should understand something important about our profession. We scribes. We don't just record events, we help create the memory that shapes how future generations will understand their world. The evening shift brings a different energy to the House of Life, as oil lamps are lit throughout the scriptorium and the day-as natural illumination gives way to the warm, flickering glow of flame light dancing across papyrus and carved walls. The transition feels almost ceremonial, marking the boundary between daytime's public duties and evening's more contemplative scholarly work. You take your place at what's becoming your regular table, the wooden surface now familiar beneath your hands. Amenhotep sets before you a collection of texts that make your eyes widen with their obvious age and importance. These aren't practice scrolls or routine administrative documents, but ancient religious manuscripts whose hieroglyphs seem to pulse with sacred authority in the lamplight. The papyrus has darkened with age to a rich amber color, and some sections show the careful repairs that indicate previous scribes have worked to preserve these precious documents for future generations. Tonight you begin copying the pyramid texts, Amenhotep explains, his voice carrying the reverence appropriate to handling such sacred material. These prayers ensured Pharaoh's successful journey to the afterlife, when they were carved into pyramid walls during the Old Kingdom. Now we preserve them on papyrus so their power remains available to future rulers and worthy nobles who can afford proper burial preparations. The responsibility feels almost overwhelming as you examine the text before you. Each hieroglyph represents not just written communication, but active spiritual technology designed to facilitate divine transformation. Your copying work is beyond mere transcription, helping to preserve spells and incantations that Egyptians believe literally determine souls' eternal fate. The weight of such responsibility makes your hand tremble slightly as you prepare your reed pen. Steady your breathing, Amenhotep counsels, noticing your nervousness. Fear creates mistakes, and mistakes in sacred texts can have consequences extending far beyond embarrassment. Trust your training, respect the material, and let both guide your hand toward accuracy. The evening's work begins with a prayer that opens the soul's pathway to divine protection, its hieroglyphs flowing in elegant lines that seem to sing even in silence. Your pen moves carefully across fresh papyrus, each symbol requiring precise execution to maintain the spiritual potency that makes these texts effective. The ancient Egyptian language reveals its sophisticated structure as you work, with words that layer multiple meanings and conceptual relationships impossible to capture in simpler writing systems. Around you, other scribes engage in similar evening duties, their lamps creating pools of golden light throughout the scriptorium. The soft scratching of red pens against papyrus creates a gentle rhythm that is both soothing and conducive to concentration. Occasionally, someone rises to trim a lamp wick or fetch fresh ink, their movements quiet and considerate of colleagues' focus. Notice how the text builds meaning through repetition and variation. Amenhotep observes as you work through a particularly complex passage. Egyptian religious poetry doesn't simply state facts, it creates emotional and spiritual resonance through rhythm, word choice, and symbolic imagery. Your copying must preserve not just accuracy, but the aesthetic qualities that give these texts their power. The hieroglyphs themselves prove endlessly fascinating as you work with them at this detailed level. Some represent concrete objects that any Egyptian would recognize: birds, tools, parts of the human body. Others symbolize abstract concepts that require cultural knowledge to interpret correctly. The most complex combine multiple elements to create ideas that couldn't be expressed any other way, forming a writing system that's simultaneously practical and deeply spiritual. As the evening progresses, you begin to understand why scribes hold such respected positions in Egyptian society. The skill required goes far beyond simple literacy, preserving the cultural DNA that makes Egyptian civilization distinctive and powerful. Every correctly copied text ensures that future generations will have access to the accumulated wisdom of their ancestors. Your hand grows steadier with each line, Amenhotep notes with satisfaction, examining your work by lamplight. Soon you'll be ready for the most challenging text, medical treatises that must be perfectly accurate, or mathematical calculations that determine architectural proportions for temple construction. The evening air carries sounds that have become familiar: distant chanting from night ceremonies, the soft footsteps of priests making their rounds, and the gentle splash of Nile water against the temple's foundation stones. These sounds create a backdrop that feels both eternal and immediately present, connecting your current moment to the timeless rhythms that have governed temple life for countless generations. Above your head, bats begin their nightly hunt, their wings creating brief shadows as they pass between lamp and ceiling in pursuit of insects drawn by the light. Their presence feels natural and appropriate. Even the most sacred spaces accommodate the practical needs of all creatures who call the temple home. The evening deepens into something approaching true night as the final lamplighting ceremony concludes throughout the temple complex, and you're invited to join the scribes' communal dinner, a daily tradition that transforms colleagues into something approaching family. The dining area takes on a different character by lamplight, the dancing shadows making familiar faces seem mysterious and ancient, as if you resharing meals with the spirits of all the scribes who've ever worked within these walls. The evening meal proves more elaborate than the midday bread and beer, reflecting both the day's completion and the temple's evening abundance. Fresh fish dominates the table, caught from the Nile that very day, and prepared with herbs that fill the air with aromatic complexity. The preparation shows sophisticated culinary knowledge: some fish grilled with coriander and garlic, others stewed in clay pots with onions and bitter greens that provide perfect counterpoint to the rich flesh. Evening fish always tastes better than morning fish, declares King, tearing into a perfectly cooked perch with obvious relish. Something about the way sunset light affects their flavor. Or perhaps it is just that we've worked up proper appetites by this hour. His observation generates knowing chuckles from the other scribes, who clearly appreciate good food as much as accurate hieroglyphs. The bread for evening meal comes from a different batch than the morning loaves, made with finer flour and shaped into decorative forms that speak to the baker's artistic ambitions. Some loaves are twisted into spirals, others shaped like lotus flowers or sacred symbols, transforming basic sustenance into edible art. You tear into a loaf shaped like the Ankh symbol, finding the bread lighter and more delicate than the substantial morning variety. Fresh dates provide sweetness to balance the savory dishes, their honey-like flavor enhanced by almonds and figs that have been imported from distant regions. The fruit creates perfect accompaniment to the evening's wine, not the thick beer of daytime, but actual fermented grape wine that carries hints of the sun-baked hills where the vines grew. The wine loosens tongues and encourages the storytelling that makes these evening gatherings memorable. Tell the new scribe about the great scroll disaster, suggests Senob, his eyes twinkling with anticipation of a familiar tale. He should understand that even experienced scribes sometimes face professional catastrophes that become legendary warnings for future generations. Amenhotep chuckles and launches into a story about a chief scribe from several decades past who decided to reorganize the entire temple library according to his own innovative system. Ketiank was brilliant with individual texts, Amenhotep begins, but possessed the organizational skills of a drunken hippopotamus. Scrollity. The story unfolds with the inevitable progression of good intentions leading to complete chaos. Ketiank's reorganization mixed medical texts with religious poetry, placed architectural drawings among love songs, and somehow managed to file the pharaoh's personal correspondence with recipes for beer brewing. The resulting confusion took months to untangle, during which time crucial documents remained lost and several important ceremonies had to be postponed. The final disaster came when visiting dignitaries requested copies of Egypt's most sacred creation myths. Amenhotep continues, his voice rich with storytelling pleasure. Ketiank confidently produced what he believed were the correct scrolls, only to discover later that he'd given them detailed instructions for treating intestinal parasites in livestock. The laughter that greets this revelation fills the dining area with warmth that has nothing to do with the oil lamps. You realize these stories serve multiple purposes: their entertainment, certainly, but also professional education that teaches important lessons about humility, attention to detail, and the dangers of overconfidence in complex systems. Other stories follow, each one revealing different aspects of scribal life and temple politics. Tales of priests who couldn't spell their own names correctly, visiting scholars who challenged fundamental Egyptian beliefs and had to be diplomatically, and administrative disasters that somehow resolved themselves through luck and determined effort by competent scribes working behind the scenes. The moral of every story, Kimwaset observes as the evening winds down, is that scribes must combine scholarly precision with practical wisdom, intellectual curiosity with professional humility. Knowledge without judgment creates chaos, but judgment without knowledge accomplishes nothing useful. The evening concludes with preparations for night. Duties not, everyone sleeps when darkness falls. As the temple requires constant attendance and some ceremonial activities occur only during specific nighttime hours, you learn that scribes rotate through night watches, ensuring that someone remains available to record any unusual events or handle emergency correspondence that might arrive from distant provinces. The transition to night duty feels like crossing into a different realm entirely, where the temple's daytime bustle gives way to something more mystical and profound. You join Kimwaset and two other scribes for the evening watch. carrying oil lamps that cast dancing shadows across corridors that seem far more mysterious in darkness than they appear during the day as bright activity. The familiar spaces take on new dimensions, with hieroglyphs seeming to move and breathe in the flickering light. Night watch teaches different lessons than day work. Kamwaset explains as you begin your rounds through the temple's sacred areas. During daylight, we focus on practical tasks, copying texts, recording ceremonies, managing correspondence. But darkness reveals the temple's spiritual essence, the divine presence that remains constant while human activities ebb and flow. Your first responsibility involves checking the eternal flames that burn throughout the temple complex, ensuring that sacred fires continue their unbroken vigil before shrine altars and in niches that have been tended continuously for generations. The flames serve both practical and spiritual purposes, providing light for necessary activities, while maintaining the divine presence that keeps cosmic order stable. Each flame requires specific attention, with wicks trimmed precisely and oil levels maintained according to ancient protocols. These fires have burned without interruption since the temple's consecration, explains J, an elderly scribe whose night watch experience spans several decades. Some flames trace their lineage back to fires lit during the Pyramid Age, sacred combustion that connects our current moment to the very foundations of Egyptian civilization. The responsibility feels both routine and profound as you help maintain these lights, understanding that your careful attention helps preserve traditions that predate most human institutions. The oil comes from sacred trees, pressed according to recipes that specify not just ingredients but the proper prayers to recite during preparation. Even the wicks receive special treatment, woven from linen grown in temple fields and prepared by priests who understand their spiritual significance. Between flame-tending duties, you continue copying sacred texts by lamplight, the nighttime atmosphere lending additional gravity to work with religious myth. The darkness seems to enhance your concentration, eliminating visual distractions and creating intimate focus between scribe, papyrus, and sacred words. Your pen moves more confidently now, guided by growing familiarity with hieroglyphic forms and increasing comfort with reed pen techniques. Night copying produces different results than day work, Jetty observes, examining your progress with evident satisfaction. Darkness encourages meditation on meaning rather than mere mechanical reproduction. Your hieroglyphs carry more spiritual weight when formed in sacred firelight than in ordinary sunshine. The temple's nocturnal soundscape proves remarkably rich, filled with subtle activities that continue throughout darkness. Distant chanting marks midnight ceremonies performed by specialized priests, their voices blending in harmonies that seem designed to communicate with divine powers rather than human audiences. The soft padding of sandaled feet indicates temple guards making their rounds, ensuring security while respecting the sacred atmosphere that requires quiet movement and reverent behavior. Occasionally, urgent messages arrive from distant provinces, carried by riders who've traveled through darkness to deliver reports that can't wait for daylight. These midnight communications often concern matters of state importance, border activities that require Pharaoh's immediate attention, natural disasters that demand temple prayers and practical assistance, or diplomatic developments that could affect Egypt's relationships with neighboring kingdoms. Record everything precisely, Kamwaset instructs, as you help transcribe one such urgent dispatch. Midnight messages often contain information that historians will study centuries from now, trying to understand how events unfolded and decisions were made. Your accuracy tonight serves scholars you'll never meet. The night progresses with quiet industry punctuated by moments of profound stillness, when the only sounds are reed pens scratching against papyrus and the gentle hiss of oil lamp flames consuming their fuel. During these peaceful intervals, you begin to understand why scribes value night watch, despite its demands the darkness creates. Conditions for deeper contemplation and more meaningful connection with the eternal knowledge they help preserve. Above your head, bats continue their nightly hunt, their presence now familiar and comforting rather than startling. Their efficient movement through darkness mirrors the scribe's own navigation of night, purposeful, guided by senses, developed through long practice and careful attention to subtle environmental cues. The deepest hours of night bring a profound stillness that seems to settle over the entire temple like a sacred blanket, muffling even the gentlest sounds and creating an atmosphere where time itself feels suspended. You find yourself alone with scrolls and starlight, the other scribes, having distributed themselves throughout the complex to maintain their various watches, leaving you in the scriptorium with only the eternal flames and the vast accumulated wisdom of centuries for company. Working by lamplight transforms the familiar hieroglyphs into something almost mystical, their shadows dancing across the papyrus as your reed pen moves with increasing confidence through passages that speak of divine mysteries and eternal truths. The text before you tonight deals with the soul's journey through the underworld, describing the trials and transformations that await every person after death. Each symbol you copy carries the weight of genuine belief. These are E&D mere stories, but practical instructions for navigating the afterlife successfully. The deceased heart will be weighed against the feather of mat. You transcribe carefully, the hieroglyphs flowing beneath your pen with practiced precision. If found heavier than truth, the soul faces annihilation. If lighter than falsehood, eternal paradise awaits. The concepts fascinate you, even as you work to reproduce them accurately. An entire civilization's understanding of morality and justice reduced to the elegant metaphor of weighing truth against the human heart. The silence around you feels alive with possibility, pregnant with the accumulated spiritual energy of countless prayers, ceremonies, and scholarly endeavors conducted within these walls. You begin to understand why ancient Egyptians believed so strongly in the power of written words. When you re-surround it by texts that have preserved human thoughts and divine communications across millennia, the boundary between symbol and reality seems far less distinct than modern minds might assume. Occasionally, the night air carries sounds from the world outside the temple walls, a dog barking in the distance, the splash of river water against dock pilings, or the faint call of a night bird hunting over the marshes. These sounds feel like messages from another universe, reminders that ordinary life continues, while you participate in activities that connect directly to eternal realms and divine purposes. Your lamp begins to burn lower, requiring careful attention to maintain adequate light for accurate copying. The ritual of trimming the wick and adding fresh oil creates a brief break in your transcription work, giving you time to stretch fingers that have grown stiff with concentration and to rest eyes that have focused intently on detailed hieroglyphic work for hours. The brief physical maintenance feels meditative, connecting you to the practical needs that support spiritual endeavors. Every scribe who's ever worked in this room has performed this same action. You muse to yourself, carefully adjusting the flame to provide optimal illumination. The gestures connect me to an unbroken chain of knowledge keepers stretching back to the very beginnings of written communication. The thought fills you with both humility and purpose. You are not just copying ancient texts, but participating in humanity's most fundamental activity, preserving wisdom for future generations. The midnight hours prove surprisingly productive, your pen moving with steady rhythm as you complete section after section of the underworld journey text. The work requires not just mechanical accuracy, but genuine understanding of the spiritual concepts being preserved. Each passage builds upon previous sections, creating a comprehensive guide to posthumous existence that demonstrates sophisticated theological thinking developed over centuries of priestly scholarship. Above you, the night sky visible through high windows sparkles with stars whose positions ancient Egyptians used to calculate both calendar dates and spiritual timing. The same constellations that guide your current copying work once helped pyramid builders align their structures with cosmic forces, demonstrating the interconnection between scholarly activities and divine purposes that gives scribal work its deeper meaning. A gentle breeze stirs through the scriptorium, carrying the scent of night-blooming flowers from the temple gardens and the eternal fragrance of Nile water that nourishes all Egyptian life. The air movement causes your lamp flame to flicker slightly, creating momentary changes in illumination that make the hieroglyphs seem to pulse with inner life. The profound quiet of deep night creates perfect conditions for the kind of focused attention that produces transcription work of exceptional quality. Without daytime distractions or social obligations, your mind can engage completely with the sacred material before you, allowing for the meditative state that transforms mechanical copying into genuine spiritual practice. You wonder what dreams will come to scribes sleeping peacefully in their quarters, while you maintain the night watch, and whether their rest will be visited by visions of the divine knowledge they help preserve each day. The first hints of dawn begin to paint the eastern horizon with the faintest suggestion of rose and gold, and you realize with surprise that the entire night has passed in what feels like a single extended moment of concentrated work. Your transcription of the underworld texts is nearly complete. The papyrus before you covered with hieroglyphs that seem to glow with their own inner light in the pre-dawn darkness. The approaching sunrise fills you with anticipation rather than exhaustion. There has something magical about witnessing the daily rebirth of Ra from your position as guardian of eternal knowledge. Rising from your work table, you carry your lamp to one of the high windows that face east toward the Nile and the desert beyond. The view from this vantage point encompasses the entire sweep of the river valley, with its carefully tended fields and irrigation channels, creating geometric patterns that speak of human intelligence working in harmony with natural forces. In the distance, the limestone cliffs of the Valley of the Kings catch the first rays of sunlight, reminding you that pharaohs' tombs filled with texts like the ones you've been copying wait in eternal darkness for the souls they redesigned to guide. Other scribes begin to stir throughout the temple complex, their movements creating gentle sounds that mark the transition from night's solitary vigil to day's communal activities. Oil lamps begin appearing in windows throughout the scriptorium as your colleagues prepare for another day of preserving civilization. As most precious resource, the accumulated wisdom of generations, who understood that knowledge without preservation dies with its original possessors. Amenhotep asks softly, appearing beside you with the quiet grace of someone who has spent decades moving through sacred spaces without disturbing their atmosphere. His eyes, bright with intelligence. Despite the early hour, examine your completed transcription with evident satisfaction. Your hieroglyphs grow more confident with each passing hour. Soon you will all be ready for the most challenging texts in our collection. The sunrise ceremony begins in the main temple, marked by the distant sound of priests, beginning their daily ritual of awakening the god and offering the first prayers of the new day. From your position in the scriptorium, you can hear the familiar rhythms of sacred chanting that will soon fill the entire complex with divine energy. The sound creates a perfect backdrop for reviewing the night's scholarly accomplishments and preparing for whatever challenges the new day might bring. Tonight you experience the deepest purpose of our profession, Amenhotep continues, his voice carrying the satisfaction of a teacher whose student has achieved genuine understanding. Scribes don't merely copy texts, we serve as bridges between mortal life and eternal knowledge, ensuring that wisdom accumulated over centuries remains available to guide future generations through their own spiritual journeys. You examine your night's work with new appreciation, seeing beyond the mechanical accuracy of individual hieroglyphs to understand the larger significance of preserving texts that offer genuine guidance for life. Ask most fundamental questions. The underworld journey instructions you've copied represent thousands of years of accumulated wisdom about death, judgment, and spiritual transformation, knowledge that Egyptian civilization considers essential for every person's ultimate welfare. The morning light grows stronger, painting the scriptorium walls with warm golden hues that make the carved hieroglyphs seem to come alive with dancing shadows. The transition from lamplight to natural illumination feels symbolic of the daily renewal that keeps both individual lives and entire civilizations fresh and purposeful. Each dawn brings new opportunities to learn, to preserve knowledge, and to contribute to the great human project of understanding existence itself. Other scribes gather around your table to examine the night's transcription work, their comments and observations revealing the collegial atmosphere that makes this ancient profession both challenging and deeply satisfying. They point out particularly well-formed hieroglyphs, discuss subtle interpretive questions raised by ambiguous passages, and offer suggestions for future copying projects that will continue developing your skills and knowledge base. The transition from night watch to day duties requires careful attention. Kamaset observes, beginning to organize materials for the morning's activities. Bodies and minds that have worked through darkness need gentle reintroduction to daylight's more intense pace. We ease into morning responsibilities rather than rushing immediately into complex tasks. The daily rhythm of temple life begins to reassert itself as priests complete their sunrise ceremonies and begin preparing for the day's various duties. The familiar sounds of administrative activities starting up throughout the complex create a comforting backdrop that makes you feel increasingly connected to this ancient institution and its timeless purposes. You realize that your night of solitary copying has somehow transformed your relationship with both the temple and your role as a scribe. What began as an assigned task has become a genuine calling connecting you to purposes larger than individual ambition or personal satisfaction. The full glory of morning unfolds around you as Ra-'s solar bark completes its nightly journey through the underworld and emerges triumphant in the eastern sky, flooding the temple complex with light that transforms every surface into gold and amber perfection. You stand with your fellow scribes on the roof of the House of Life, a daily ritual that connects the scholarly community to the cosmic rhythms that govern all Egyptian existence. The view from this elevated position encompasses the entire sweep of Theban civilization, the great river curving through green fields, the bustling city awakening to another day of commerce and worship, and the eternal monuments that proclaim Egypt's divine destiny to future generations. Every sunrise reminds us why our work matters, Amenhotep says quietly, his weathered hands resting on the stone parapet, as he surveys the landscape that has remained essentially unchanged for thousands of years. Pharaohs build monuments to preserve their names, but scribes preserve the knowledge that makes monuments possible. Without written instructions, architectural plans, mathematical calculations, and religious texts, even the greatest pyramid becomes merely a pile of impressive stones. The morning air carries the familiar scents that have become the perfume of your new existence: lotus blossoms from the temple gardens, frankincense from the sacred fires that burn continuously throughout the complex, and the clean, life-giving fragrance of Nile water that makes all Egyptian civilization possible. These aromas blend with sounds equally characteristic of temple life: the gentle splash of ritual ablution, the soft percussion of sandaled feet on stone pathways, and the melodic chanting that marks the completion of sunrise ceremonies. Below you, the temple complex reveals its full magnificent scope in the clear morning light. Massive pylons frame courtyards where priests move with ceremonial precision, their white linen garments bright against the honey-colored limestone walls. Obelisks pierce the sky like prayers made manifest in stone, their hieroglyphic inscriptions proclaiming divine truths that your fellow scribes helped preserve and transmit across generations. The scale of human achievement represented here fills you with both humility and pride. Humility at being part of something so much larger than individual existence. Pride at contributing your own small but essential part to civilization's greatest accomplishments. The morning light reveals truths that darkness conceals, observes you, who joins your rooftop gathering with the slow, careful movements of someone whose joints have accommodated decades of scholarly work. During night watches, we focus intensely on individual texts and specific copying tasks. The sunrise shows us the larger context, how our detailed work contributes to the vast enterprise of preserving human knowledge for future generations. The city of Thebes spreads before you in all its bustling complexity, already alive with activities that will continue throughout the day. Merchants arrange their goods in market stalls. Farmers guide irrigation water through channels that distribute Nile fertility to carefully tended fields. And craftsmen begin work on projects that range from practical pottery to artistic masterpieces destined for noble tombs. Every activity visible from your elevated position depends ultimately on written knowledge trait, requires contracts and correspondence. Agriculture follows seasonal calculations preserved in temple texts, and artistic work draws inspiration from religious literature that scribes have maintained for centuries. The other scribes begin descending from the roof as the sun climbs higher. Returning to the scriptorium for the day's first formal work session, you linger for a few more moments, allowing the morning's beauty and significance to settle deeply into memory. The experience of witnessing sunrise from this sacred vantage point feels like a daily rebirth, renewing your commitment to the calling that has somehow become as natural as breathing. The new day brings new challenges and opportunities. Amenhotep notes, pausing beside you before heading back to his copying duties. This afternoon we begin training you for advanced text medical treatises that require perfect accuracy, astronomical calculations that guide temple ceremonies, and legal documents that affect people's lives and property rights. Your night watch demonstrated readiness for more complex responsibilities. The prospect of increased challenges fills you with excitement rather than anxiety. Each new level of responsibility represents deeper integration into the scholarly community, has become your spiritual and intellectual home. The skills you've developed, careful observation, precise handwriting, cultural understanding, and patient attention to detail prepare you for work that will affect Egyptian society in ways both immediate and eternal. As you finally turn away from the magnificent sunrise vista and descend toward the scribe, you carry with you a profound sense of belonging to something both ancient and timeless. The daily renewal of light over the Nile Valley mirrors the continuous renewal of knowledge that makes civilization possible. And your role as a scribe connects you directly to this fundamental human activity. The day settles into its familiar rhythm as naturally as the Nile finds its course to the sea, and you take your place at the writing table that has become as comfortable as an old friend's embrace. The morning light streams through the high windows with perfect intensity for detailed work, illuminating papyrus that seems to welcome your reed pen, like fertile soil welcomes seed. Around you, the gentle scratching of other scribes' pens creates the soundtrack of intellectual endeavor that has echoed through these halls for countless generations. Amenhotep places before you a medical text of extraordinary complexity, its hieroglyphs dense with anatomical terminology and pharmaceutical instructions that require absolute precision. Today marks your transition from student to practitioner, he announces with evident satisfaction. This treatise on treating ailments will test every skill you've developed, cultural understanding, and the patience to work with material that affects people's physical well-being. The responsibility feels both daunting and exhilarating as you examine the ancient medical knowledge that Egyptian physicians have accumulated through centuries of careful observation and treatment. Each prescription represents real human suffering alleviated through systematic study of disease and healing, preserved in written form so future doctors can benefit from their predecessors' hard-won expertise. Your copying work directly serves people you'll never meet, ensuring that effective treatments remain available across generations. The morning progresses with steady industry as you work through passages describing surgical procedures, herbal remedies, and diagnostic techniques that demonstrate sophisticated medical understanding. The hieroglyphic terminology proves challenging, requiring frequent consultation with reference texts and discussions with more experienced scribes, who can clarify subtle meanings that affect treatment outcomes. Every word must be perfect. Medical errors and copying could literally mean the difference between healing and harm for future patients. Your hand moves with genuine confidence now, Kamwaset observes during a brief break, examining your work with the critical eye of someone who understands the standards required for professional scribal work. The hieroglyphs flow naturally, and your spacing shows understanding of how texts should appear to readers, who use them for practical purposes rather than mere study. The afternoon brings visitors to the scriptorium, junior priests seeking copies of ritual texts, administrative officials requesting correspondence with distant provinces, and scholars from other temples who come to consult Karnak's extensive library collections. You observe these interactions with growing appreciation for the scribe's central role in Egyptian society, serving not merely as copyists, but as cultural facilitators, who help knowledge flow between different communities and institutions. As evening approaches once again, you realize that the daily cycle of temple life has become as natural to you as breathing. The progression from dawn ceremonies through administrative duties to evening contemplation creates a rhythm that nourishes both intellectual growth and spiritual development. Each day brings new challenges and opportunities to contribute to the great human project of preserving wisdom for future generations. The familiar preparation for evening duties feels like putting on comfortable clothing after a long journey. Your writing materials arrange themselves under your hands with practiced efficiency. Oil lamps are lit with movements that have become automatic, and the transition from natural light to flame illumination no longer feels jarring, but perfectly appropriate for the night as more contemplative work. Tomorrow we begin a new project, Amenhotep announces as the day's formal activities wind down. Royal correspondence that requires not just accuracy but diplomatic sensitivity. Letters between pharaoh and foreign rulers that affect Egypt's relationships with distant kingdoms. Your skills have developed enough to handle such delicate responsibilities. The prospect fills you with quiet pride and renewed purpose, from fumbling attempts at basic hieroglyphs to handling correspondence that affects international relations. Represents a journey of growth that connects you ever more deeply to Egyptian civilization as most essential functions. The knowledge that your work contributes directly to Pharaoh's ability to govern effectively and maintain Egypt's prosperity creates satisfaction that transcends mere professional accomplishment. As night settles over the temple complex and the eternal flames resume their vigilant watch over sacred knowledge, you understand that you've found something more valuable than mere employment or even career satisfaction. You've discovered a calling that connects individual effort to purposes larger than personal ambition, preservation and transmission of human wisdom that makes civilization itself possible. The evening stars emerge above Thebes, as they have for thousands of years. Their unchanging patterns a reminder that some things endure beyond individual lives, or even entire dynasties. Your work as a scribe connects you to this eternal dimension, ensuring that the knowledge accumulated by countless generations remains available to guide and inspire those who will come after you into the infinite future. The work settles into your bones like ancient riverbed sediment, each day layering new understanding over previous knowledge, until the distinction between your modern consciousness and your scribal identity becomes as blurred as heat. Mirages over desert sand. Your hands have learned the weight of reed against papyrus. Your eyes have adjusted to the subtle variations in lamplight that affect copying accuracy, and your mind has absorbed the cultural rhythms that make temple life feel like home. The evening breeze carries familiar fragrances through the windows, lotus blossoms releasing their perfume to the night air, frankincense from altars where eternal flames maintain their vigil, and the green sweetness of Nile water that connects all Egyptian existence to its life-giving source. These scents have become as much a part of your identity as your own breath, marking the boundary between the world you once knew and the timeless reality you now inhabit. Your fellow scribes move around you with the quiet efficiency of people who understand their purpose completely, their conversations flowing between professional observations and gentle humor that binds the scholarly community together across differences in age and experience. The sound of their voices, the soft scratching of red pens, and the distant murmur of evening prayers creates a symphony of human endeavor that seems to echo backward through centuries of similar nights when other scribes preserved other texts for generations they would never meet. The papyrus beneath your hands holds hieroglyphs that will outlast the civilization that created them, carrying forward the accumulated wisdom of a people who understood that knowledge without preservation dies with its original possessors. Each symbol you've learned to form connects you to this eternal conversation between past and future, making you a bridge across time itself. As consciousness gently fades into the deeper rhythms of Nile and temple, of sunrise ceremonies and evening contemplation, you realize that some journeys do UNTND simply expand to encompass larger and larger circles of meaning until the traveler becomes part of the landscape itself. As eternal and necessary as the river that makes all life possible, the last thing you notice before sleep claims you is the sound of reed pens continuing their patient work in distant corners of the scriptorium, carrying forward the endless task of preserving human wisdom for those who will inherit tomorrow's mysteries.